tonight, but I'm sad because tomorrow I'm going to leave Singapore, and it seems like I've met and made so many friends here in these last few days. And this has been kind of like a summer school, except that instead it's been at a Baha'i center and coming every day, but we've still had as many wonderful sessions and really good food and a lot of company, and the children are so well behaved and beautiful here. I'm really going to miss this. I hope I come back to Singapore soon. I have family that live in Australia, so I often visit Australia. So maybe next time I come to visit my family, I'll stop here again. I was moved to hear the singing of the chant that they just sang here, God is sufficient unto me. And I don't know how many of you know, that is the first thing that was sung when Baha'u'llah became a manifestation of God. So you can actually say that our faith began with music, because the first thing Baha'u'llah did while he was in the Sea of Shoghi receiving revelation for the first time was he taught all of the prisoners to chant. And they sang those words. We don't know what melody they sang, but they sang those words. And whenever I think about him singing those words, I always think about the idea of complete darkness. Because I don't know if you're aware, when Baha'u'llah taught the prisoners to sing that, it was so dark that you couldn't see your hand in front of you. I want you to imagine now, put your hand right here and you can't see it, not even a shadow of your hand, because you had to go down several flights of stairs until you were in absolute, he said, pitch black. It was called the black pit. It was as dark could be, as if you had no eyes. Also, they say it stunk so bad because, you know, the smell, because it was actually an old reservoir turned into a sewer, and they sat down there. And I always think about the idea that in the darkest spot on the face of the earth, below the earth, in the darkest place possible, you couldn't be any darker, that's where Baha'u'llah brought light to the world. So the contrast of light to darkness. And I think it was no accident that God chose to bring light to the world in the darkest spot, because that really is a good theme for tonight's subject, the theme of light in darkness. Because, you know, light is not afraid of darkness. Light isn't afraid of darkness. In fact, light kind of likes darkness in a way, wouldn't you agree? If you took a flashlight outside at noonday and turned it on, would the flashlight have much power or ability to be seen? If you take a flashlight down at midnight and turn it on, it can be seen. So a flashlight says, give me the darkness, because that gives me a chance to be seen and to shine. Now, here in Singapore and in every part of the Baha'i world, we are trying to bring the light that Baha'u'llah first began in that Sea of Shoghi, in that dark area. We're trying to bring the light to our communities here in this cluster. Do you have one cluster in Singapore?
Yeah.
It's one cluster, that's good, so I don't have to say all. But in this cluster, we want to bring the light of Baha'u'llah to the cluster, and if we can do that, then the world will transform, because this is the light that is going to transform the world. I want to ask you, of all the things that we can do, what is most likely going to secure the triumph of this light in Singapore? Of all the things we can do this, that, this, that, this, that, what is going to secure the triumph? What is going to enable the light of Baha'u'llah to spread throughout this cluster, throughout the 5 million inhabitants of Singapore? What will do it? Who can raise their hand? You can guess too. There's no right answer here, but who can guess?
Action.
What? Action? Okay. What else?
Unity.
Unity? What else?
Love.
Love? What else? Do you want me to read you a statement from Shoghi Effendi? Shoghi Effendi said that there are a number of things that will not secure the triumph of the cause. And he listed 4 things that will not secure the triumph of the cause. And let's first of all see what those 4 things are. The first thing he says will not secure the triumph of the cause, he says, is the force of numbers. Okay? He says, not by the force of numbers. Okay, what he means by this is that there's only a few Baha'is in the world, and we think if we had more Baha'is in the world, or more Baha'is in Singapore, then that would somehow enable us to triumph more. Would you agree with that? That a lot of people think that?
Yeah.
It's a normal thing to think of. That, oh, if we had 500 Baha'is in Singapore, if we had 1,000, if we had 2,000, if we had 10,000, if we had 1,000,000 Baha'is, then surely we would be able to prevail. And Shoghi Effendi says, no. The force of numbers is not going to succeed. It's not going to secure the triumph of the cause. So you say, okay, if it's not numbers that we need, in other words, we can't go out and complain, oh, we only have 500 Baha'is, so we don't have the ability to affect Singapore. You can't say that because Shoghi Effendi said that's not a reason. That's not a reason, not the force of numbers. The second thing he said was that would not cause the triumph of the cause was the exposition of a set of new and noble principles. Okay? So in other words, going out and teaching the Baha'i teachings, the principles of the Baha'i faith, he said, and the exposition of them means the teaching. Not by the teaching of the principles of the Baha'i faith will succeed in bringing the light of the faith to Singapore. Are you a little bit surprised now? We don't need big numbers, and we don't need to go out and expose, proclaim, organize the principles. Okay, that's the second thing Shoghi Effendi is not going to secure it. The third, he says, not by an organized campaign of teaching. How many of you are involved in an organized campaign of teaching of some sort? Pretty well organized. Well, maybe could be better organized, but still we're doing it. And we've been doing it for a long time. And Shoghi Effendi says, not by an organized campaign. The whole 5-year plan is an organized campaign of teaching, isn't it? Okay, but Shoghi Effendi says, not by that. That's the third thing that will not secure the triumph of the cause. Okay, you say, well, if it's not by how many Baha'is we have, if it's not by numbers, it's not by teaching the principles, it's not by a campaign of teaching, it must be by our faith and our enthusiasm. How many agree with that? Must be our faith and our enthusiasm? Would you agree with that? Who thinks it must be that? Shoghi Effendi is not even by the staunchness of our faith or the exaltation of our enthusiasm. Not even that. So you say, okay, well, we're very enthusiastic, we're very staunch, we have an organized teaching campaign, our numbers aren't very big, but none of these things are going to help. There's only one thing, Shoghi Effendi says, that will enable us to succeed. So let me read the whole statement of Shoghi Effendi. He says, not by the force of numbers, not by the mere exposition of a set of new and noble principles, not by an organized campaign of teaching, no matter how worldwide and elaborate in its character. I don't care if it's a whole worldwide, very elaborate campaign. Not even by the staunchness of our faith or the exaltation of our enthusiasm can we ultimately hope to vindicate in the eyes of a critical and skeptical age the supreme claim of the Abha revelation. And then he says what will do it. One thing, and only one thing. One thing and only one thing. This takes one thing. He says, will secure the undoubted triumph of this sacred cause, namely, the extent to which our own inner life and private character mirror forth in their manifold aspects the splendor of those eternal principles proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. So he says the one thing, and the only thing that will do it, is if our inner life and our private character, not our outer life and public character, okay? Our inner life and our private character. Now, if you think about this, then the entire victory, the entire battle is within. The whole campaign is within. And so, the reason I mention this is that in 1938, late 1938, actually December 25th of 1938, what is December 25?
Christmas.
It's Christmas Day. On Christmas Day, Shoghi Effendi signed a letter and sent it to the American Baha'is. But not any Christmas Day. Christmas Day 1938. What happened in 1939? Germany invaded Poland and began World War II. This is the last Christmas before World War II. So as the world was plunging into what was, arguably the darkest point in its history, as it was plunging into that, Shoghi Effendi is writing a 77-page letter to the American Baha'is. And in 1937, a year and a half before, he had launched the first 7-year plan. It was the first organized plan of the Tablets of the Divine Plan, of which now we've had many more, and the 5-year plan is part of it. But in launching the very first plan on Christmas Day, of 1938, just before the world plunged into war, he sent a 77-page letter, and today it's published under the title Advent of Divine Justice. And in that letter, he describes the tasks that Baha'is have to do, and he says that in order to succeed, we have to achieve something first, and he called them spiritual prerequisites for success. Now, a prerequisite is something that's required before, because a requisite is something that's required. Pre means before. So it's a prerequisite, something required before, and it's spiritual. It's not material. In other words, we don't have to have money, we don't have to have buildings, we don't have organizational structures. Something is required spiritual. And he says that these spiritual prerequisites are 3 in number. There's 3 of them. Okay, there's 3 things. And he said they stand out as preeminent and vital. What does preeminent mean? Who can tell me what preeminent means? Well, what does eminent mean? Eminent means very high, very exalted, you know, the most important. An eminent person is a very important person. Pre also means, you know, it comes before. It's the first. What does vital mean? I'm sorry? Vital means necessary to life. Vital means something is vital.
Can live.
I'm sorry?
Will survive.
You'll survive, yes. In other words, so these 3 things are the most important, and they're necessary for life. So he says there's 3 of them. I'm not going to mention what those 3 are yet. But the Universal House of Justice, in their first 5-year plan message, which was December 28 of 2010, remember we keep talking about that 24-page letter? In that, they repeat what Shoghi Effendi said, and then they have 1 paragraph on each of the 3 things, the 3 spiritual prerequisites for success. So you say to me, why am I talking about a letter Shoghi Effendi wrote in 1938? The reason I am is that the Universal House of Justice said that that letter still applies to us today, and they say, and I'm going to read it, that we would do well to reflect on the implications of Shoghi Effendi's observations in relation to the 5-year plan. So that's why Ilango has made this the last subject, because the House of Justice said we need to reflect on them. So let's go back quickly and look at Shoghi Effendi's letter, see what he says are the 3 spiritual prerequisites for success. And Shoghi Effendi said, surveying the whole, the most pressing needs of the community, and attempting to estimate the more serious deficiencies by which it is being handicapped in the discharge of its duties, I feel it my duty to lay special stress upon and draw special and urgent attention of the entire body of the American believers to, he says, the essential requirements for success. Now he says he wants to impress it upon the entire body of American believers, be they young or old, white or colored, teachers or administrators, veteran or newcomers. So nobody can say, oh, well, that's not for me, that's for him, that's for her. How many of you are young? How many of you are old? How many of you are either young or old? Okay. How many of you are new? How many of you are veterans? How many are one or the other? You know, how many of you are administrators or not administrators? Teachers or not administrators? In other words, Shoghi Effendi didn't exclude. He said every single Baha'i, no matter who they are, how long they've been a Baha'i, what race, what background, they must draw, and they say they must give this their attention. Then he said something interesting. He said that we have really what is a 2-fold crusade. A 2-fold crusade. And what he meant by this is that the plans, and all the plans, are a crusade. They have goals. You know, sometimes they had to raise up local assemblies or national assemblies or pioneers or, you know, all kinds of things in the old days. Today we have the crusade, you know, to extend the education of children and the education of junior youth and study circles and devotional gatherings. This is all the outward aspect, and that is a crusade. He said there's a double crusade. The other side of the double crusade is the individual conquering themselves. That's why we call it a 2-fold crusade. And right now, the House of Justice is saying we're in the middle of a 2-fold crusade. Quite often, we stand up at our Baha'i gatherings, our reflection gatherings, our meetings, and we focus an awful lot on this side of the crusade. And we forget that none of that will work if we don't have the twofold crusade. And that's basically what Shoghi Effendi says. And he says everything depends on this side, because he called this side the bedrock of that side. What is a bedrock?
Foundation.
In archaeology, what is a bedrock? It's something upon which everything, it's like the foundation, isn't that right? And so he says the foundation of this plan. So I can stand up here tonight and talk all I want about study circles and devotional gatherings and junior youth and the area teaching committee and cluster reflections and cycles of growth, all of the things which we really need to talk about. But they must stand on a bedrock according to Shoghi Effendi, and that bedrock is these three things. Are you interested to know what these three things are?
Yes.
You are?
Yes.
Okay, so you want to go through them? Okay.
Tom, sorry, can I just ask a question here? Earlier on you said, Shoghi Effendi said 4 things that will not secure the triumph of the cause. Can you share with us the source of it?
Oh,
We can find
it's a
that.
very well-known quotation.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's interesting. I don't know what letter it comes from. But it's in almost every compilation. It's like in Lights of Guidance and you know, all the messages of the Guardian, directives of the Guardian, all that. If you type in "not by the force of numbers," type that into one of those, even on the internet, you'll find it, because it's a very well-known quotation. But it's interesting. I don't know exactly. I suspect. Well, here it says here, in my thing it says Lights of Guidance, page 366. But that doesn't mean that's where it originally came from. I think it's probably from a
Thank
letter.
you.
Yeah, 366. I didn't know I had it in my notes. So you want to know what the three things are, okay? The first thing he said was rectitude of conduct. He says a high rectitude of conduct. So let me read exactly what he says. He says, the three things that constitute the bedrock on which the security of all plans must ultimately rest, he says they are none other than a high sense of moral rectitude of conduct in their social, administrative activities. Social and administrative activities. So what does rectitude of conduct mean? Does anyone know what that means? What does rectitude mean?
Righteousness.
I'm sorry?
The upstanding and righteousness.
Yes? Does anyone know what the actual word rectitude means? It means correct. It also can be straight. To rectify a line is to straight a line, is to make a line straight. But it means correctness or straightness or something. So there's a certain kind of conduct that Shoghi Effendi said is a rectitude of conduct, and we need to have this. Now, he described what rectitude of conduct was in a few words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 words, okay, of rectitude of conduct. And they are justice, equity. Is justice and equity the same thing? They're similar, aren't they? But they're slightly different. Justice and equity. Truthfulness. How many of you are truthful? It's a hard one. Honesty. And what's the difference between truthfulness and honesty? I'm sorry? They seem quite close to me. He says justice and equity. They seem quite close. Truthfulness and honesty. Fair-mindedness. Fair-mindedness. That we are fair-minded.
Justice.
Reliability. That's a hard one, don't you think? How many of you are completely reliable? How many of you, is your husband or wife completely reliable? Your children reliable? Your teacher? Is government reliable? How is reliability doing in the world today? Okay, reliability. And he says trustworthiness. Now, is justice and equity similar?
No.
Is truthfulness and honesty similar? And is reliability and trustworthiness similar? I find it interesting that Shoghi Effendi used 2 words, and then 2 words and 2 words, but 6 things. Now, he says that this attitude, this action of rectitude of conduct, must distinguish every phase of the life of the Baha'i community. In other words, he said it must be in your work, it must be in your homes, it must be among your families, it must be in your Baha'i communities. In other words, it's not something you just do every now and then. sometimes we have different ways of acting depending on where we are. We go to Baha'i meetings and we shake everyone's hand, we say Allah Akbar, and then we go home and we yell at the kids or the wife or something like that. Or we go to work and we act very corrupt, because they're all, in other words, you depending on which environment you're in, you might behave differently. Isn't that true? So you might go to work and everyone is cheating and lying and this and that, so you just get into that. You go home and you have a different thing, and you go to school, you have a different thing. Shoghi Effendi said that our rectitude of conduct must distinguish every single phase of our lives. Every single phase of our lives. He said that it must apply to the elected representatives, especially. So it says if anyone is a member of an institution, he says whether local, regional, or national, they must do this, because he says there's a demoralizing influence in the political world of those that are in organizational power to not have these qualities. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so he says that if we want to distinguish ourselves, we need to do this. He called for an abiding sense of undeviating justice in what he called a strangely disordered world. Okay, a strangely disordered world. In other words, the world is quite disordered. Would you agree? And Shoghi Effendi used the word strangely disordered, because there's something kind of strange within the world. And he says here, I'm going to read this, this is the House of Justice saying, he appealed to the believers to exemplify rectitude of conduct in every aspect of their lives, in their business dealings. Okay, so we have to have rectitude of conduct in our business dealings. Uh-oh. Is that going to make it hard? Okay, in our business dealings, in their domestic lives. That means in your home, amongst your family. In all manner of employment. In every service they render to the cause and to their people, and to observe its requirements in their uncompromising adherence to the laws and principles of the faith. Now, the House of Justice continues to say that since 1938, when Shoghi Effendi said this, the world has deteriorated more. Isn't that right? How much more corrupt is the world today than it was in 1938? I think so, a lot. If I watch the old movies, from the 1930s, they seem so polite and everything. And yet, Shoghi Effendi said it was corrupt back then. So the House points this out. They say that political life everywhere has continued to deteriorate at an alarming rate in the intervening years, as the very conception of statesmanship has been drained of meaning, as policies have come to serve the economic interest of the few in the name of progress, as hypocrisy has been allowed to undermine the operation of social and economic structures. Would you agree this is all taking place? There's hypocrisy, that all the laws seem to benefit just a small few, and in other words, there's not justice. He says, if indeed great effort was required for the Friends to uphold the high standards of the faith then, so they say, if it was hard to do it back in 1938, how much greater must be the exertion in the world that rewards dishonesty. Does this world reward dishonesty? Have you seen in the world, in a world that rewards dishonesty, that encourages corruption? Does the world encourage corruption here in Singapore? They say that treats truth as a negotiable commodity. Is that true? Is that going on in the world today? They say profound is the confusion that threatens the foundations of society, and unwavering must be the resolve of all those involved in Baha'i activity, lest the slightest trace of self-interest becloud their judgment. So really what the House of Justice is saying is that since 1938, the darkness has increased. The darkness has increased. So what does that mean about the light of a rectitude of conduct? What does it really mean? If the darkness has increased, which is the House of Justice, what does it mean about the light?
It has to be more opportunity brighter.
Does it not mean that the light will more easily be seen?
Yes.
Is that not true? In other words, if right now there's corruption and hypocrisy and the unreliability and lack of justice, if you go out and you are truthful, it will be seen more clearly, more quickly, more readily than ever before. In other words, we should view the darkness of society as an opportunity to stand out. In other words, we can shine the light in darkness. Now, the House of Justice says in this letter that it's very important to remember what they call two interlocking principles. Because if I start talking to you today about the high standards of the Baha'i principles, you may feel that you can't achieve them. Or you may feel they're too high or they're too lofty. Isn't that right? And it just sounds like I'm talking and saying, you have to be good. And you say, well, you should be good. In other words, whenever someone says, but I give advice, I say, they give back here, which is quite true. And so we have to be very careful that we don't look at the high standards of the faith and look where we are and somehow think we're never going to get there. So the House of Justice says we need to recognize the importance of what they say, two fundamental interlocking precepts. And let's see what they are. On the one hand is the high standard of the conduct that Baha'u'llah has given us. A very high standard of truthfulness, honesty, justice, fair-mindedness, and so on. They say, and that standard, they say, can never be compromised. Okay, so over there. On the other hand, they say, it must be acknowledged that as human beings, we are far from perfect. Okay, how many of you are not perfect? How many of you are perfect? Anyone perfect? No one's perfect, right? We're all not perfect, right? So these are two concepts. One is that we're way down here, and the other is the standard up here. Okay, so what they say is, what is expected of everyone is, what do you think it is? They say, what is expected of everyone is?
To try.
To try.
Strive.
Try is correct, but there's much more to it than try.
Strive.
Strive, there's more to it than strive. One word that's missing. I'm sorry?
Action.
Action, striving, there's still a word missing.
Persevere.
I'm sorry?
Persevere.
Persevere? They're all the same words, aren't they? But there's still a word missing.
Enthusiastic.
Sacrifice.
Not yet. There's a word missing here.
First letter.
What is expected of everyone is... You got it. Okay. They said sincere and effort, which is, effort is like the strive and persevere, and then sincere. Okay. But there was a word in between, sincere blank effort. And it's that blank word that I want to make sure we get. They say, we are far from perfect. What is expected of everyone is sincere blank effort.
Sustained.
Sustained? Close but not...
Continuous. Constant.
Constant, you're the closest.
Consistent.
You're close? Okay. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it again. What is expected of everyone is sincere daily effort. Daily effort. And remember, didn't we have a whole talk on this a couple of days ago? Maybe it was too many days ago. Okay.
Little.
In other words, you are you're not expected to go from here to here. That's what the House is saying. You're expected to take a step. In other words, you have to think of the Baha'i standard as a journey. And you must take a step on that journey today. In other words, you're not a Baha'i unless you're trying to be a little more truthful today, or a little more trustworthy today, or a little more just today. You cannot become Abdul Baha tomorrow. You can't do it. You can go out, you can buy an abha, you can grow a beard, put on a fake beard, you can do whatever you want. You can't become Abdul Baha tomorrow. But you can take one step closer. And so the word daily is very important in there. Then the House of Justice says something else very interesting. They say self-righteousness is to be eschewed. Okay, now, self-righteousness. What is self-righteousness? That's something that I feel I'm really good or I'm better than other people. Okay? Do you know some people, they talk about this and they're mainly concerned with how other people are no good and not themselves. In America right now, a lot of Christians are solely concerned with the sins of others and not concerned with their own sins. It's like their whole life is dependent on attacking and stopping other people from doing certain things. Can you believe that? And this is exactly the opposite of Christianity or any religion. So the House of Justice says self-righteous is to be eschewed. Eschewed means to completely shun. Okay, so at no time do we ever think we're great, or that other people are not great, or whatever. We never think that. We just think we are going to take whatever step we need to take today. I don't care how great you think you are in honesty. Take another step tomorrow, and that's fine. Don't take that step tomorrow, and a big liar may be better than you, because maybe he's not quite as big a liar as he was. Do you understand? Self-righteous to be eschewed. So, remember this. I said this before. You cannot change your destination in a day, but you can change your direction. And you need to change your direction here and now. Now, I'm going to move forward a bit. Shoghi Effendi said there were 4 steps to achieve the Baha'i standard in conduct. And if you could memorize these 4 steps, you can achieve it. Okay, so I'm going to list these 4 steps. It comes from one of the earliest letters Shoghi Effendi said. First and foremost, he says, the first thing one has to do, he says, is to use every possible means to purge one's heart and motives. So you have to purge your heart and motives. In other words, why do I want to have these qualities? All the good qualities of justice and fair-mindedness and equity and truthfulness and many other conduct. Why do I want to have them? I have to purge my heart and motives. He says, otherwise engaging in any form of enterprise would be futile. Okay, so we have to, and this is obviously the first thing, because Baha'u'llah says in the Hidden Words, what's his first counsel?
Possess
Possess a pure. And in Baha'u'llah, in the Kitab-i-Igan, he says the true seeker, before entering on the path, and then he lists about 25 or 26 things. The first one is what? He must purify his heart. He must purify. In other words, purifying your heart is the first step. So that's the first step, purify your heart. 2, he says it is essential to abstain from hypocrisy and blind imitation, inasmuch as their foul odor is soon detected by every man of understanding and wisdom. So you cannot have hypocrisy or blind imitation. So these qualities cannot be faked. You can't fake them. You can't do them hypocritically. And he says that hypocrisy has a foul odor that can be detected. Can you detect hypocrisy? Does it have a stink or an odor? Does it? If someone comes up to you and you're very nice, they're trying to be kind, but they're not really sincere. Can you detect it? So one cannot go out and fake trustworthiness or reliability or truthfulness, in other words. So Shoghi Effendi says you have to abstain from that. So Abdu'l-Baha says, look at me, follow me, be as I am. You want to copy Abdu'l-Baha, but you can't blindly copy it. It has to be genuine. Okay, so the first step is purify your heart. The second step is avoid blind imitation or hypocrisy. The third, Shoghi Effendi says, the friends must observe specific times for the remembrance of God, meditation, devotion, and prayer. Okay, so is the third thing, and they must. And he says, for it is highly unlikely, nay, impossible, for any enterprise to develop when deprived of divine bestowals and confirmation. So you cannot become Baha'i without divine bestowals. You can't do it on your own. You want to be trustworthy, you want to be reliable, you want to be just, you want to be loving, you want to be kind, you want to be compassionate. You can try all you want, but you can't do it without God helping you. Okay? So if you don't pray, it's not going to happen. So you must observe specific times for remembrance of God. That means the obligatory prayers, and then also meditation, devotion, and prayer. We're told this has to be done once in the morning, once at night. Any Baha'i that is good in character, they're probably doing that. And any Baha'i that's, maybe any of us here in this room that find it's a little bit difficult to change our character, maybe we should start doing that first. See if that has an effect. So those are 3 things. Shoghi Effendi continues to say, one can hardly imagine what a great influence genuine love, truthfulness, and purity of motive exert. And now he's saying the first 3 things. One can hardly imagine what a force they exert. But these traits cannot be acquired. This is the 4th point. They cannot be acquired by any believer unless blank.